Hello, my name is Christy Cuaya, and my research presentation will be about suicide. Now, in this first part of the presentation, we'll be going over the suicide rates. Now, the statistics in this presentation will be from the year of 2019. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of deaths in the United States. We have seen such a huge number of suicide deaths increasing since 1999. These numbers are alarming since it's not a few hundred or thousand of the population that are dealing with problems relating to suicide. There's actually millions of people going through this. This is why the public health has always taken suicide seriously, since the numbers of the data aren't decreasing at all. Now, 3 important things to consider during this presentation. The first will be suicide itself. The definition of suicide is when death is caused by the person themselves. The second important thing to consider during this presentation are suicide attempts. This is when someone attempts the act of suicide but becomes unsuccessful. According to the CDC, there has been 1.38 million suicide attempts in 2019. The third important thing for this presentation is suicidal ideation. This is when someone is actively considering and planning suicide. According to the CDC, there has been 12 million people that have contemplated about suicide. Next, we will go over the 3 common suicide methods. The first popular method is using firearms. Over 23,941 people have used this method in 2019, unfortunately. Using a firearm for a suicide is the most favorable since it causes a quick death. Now, the second popular method is suffocation. Over 12,563 people have used this method. The third popular method is poisoning, which over 6,125 people have used this method. Now, some firearm statistics in 2019. We see in this pie chart that I have made of firearm usage by gender, where males are a huge percentage with more than half to use a firearm in their suicide. Using a firearm counts for 50.39% in suicide deaths. Meanwhile, females only make up 33.4% of the firearm usage in 2019. Now, for this next slide, we're going to see statistics about suicidal thoughts in 2019. Those who are more tend to struggle with suicidal thoughts are those aged from 18 to 25 years old with 11.8 prevalence, compared to those with less suicidal thoughts are categorized over 50 years old with a 2.4 prevalence. Now, we see in this pie chart that I've made, females count for 5.1% of suicidal thoughts, while men only count for 4.8, which isn't too far from females. Now we will discuss about the highest rate of suicide, which was men in 2019. To my surprise, when I found this data, middle-aged white men have the highest rate of suicide in 2019. Men are just as likely to commit suicide just as women. In 2019, white males have been accounted for 69.38% of suicide deaths. Now, in this slide, we'll be talking about suicide attempts. There has been 1.38 million people that have attempted suicide in 2019, according to the CDC. Young adults aging from 18 to 25 years old are the most common to attempt suicide, while those over the age of 50 are the lowest percentage to commit suicide. Now, to break it down by gender for suicide attempts, in this pie chart, we see females are more likely to commit suicide than men by 0.3% difference, which isn't that much of a difference. In this next slide, we'll be talking about suicide attempts by race. Now, the suicide attempts by race, we see in these 2019 stats that those who are mixed with 2 races are more likely to commit suicide with 1.5% compared to other races such as Hispanic, White, Black, Pacific Islander, the Asian community, etc. With a 0.4%, we see the Asian community are the lowest percentage to have suicide attempts. Now, the suicide rates by age, according to these 2019 stats, we see the highest male rates are those aging over 75 years old, and for the highest female rate, it will be those aging 45 to 64 years old. This data is different here that the males have a 39.9%, meanwhile, females only have a 9.6%. For the lowest suicide rate by gender, we see for the females and males are children aging from 10 to 14 years old. Now, in this next slide, we will go over suicide rates, with the highest and lowest rates categorized by race. The highest rates for suicide actually both have the same rates, which is American Indians for both females and males. The only difference we see here is for the lowest race rates for both genders. For males, it will be 11.2%. For Asian and Pacific Islanders. For females, it will be 2.9% with those who are Black. Now, moving on to the next slide, we see that the public health has offered a lot of help to the public to those who are struggling with suicide and might be actively thinking about it. The first thing is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. This is a lifeline that is 24/7, completely free to call, and is completely confidential. They support different people who might categorize themselves in such types listed in this PowerPoint. Now, in this next slide, we see another thing that public health has helped the public is from the CDC, where they came out with their own guide that states and communities can use to help those struggling. This guide can help people who realize who might be at risk for suicide and some prevention strategies. Now, the third thing that public health has helped is with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Their mission is to help save lives and bring hope to those affected by suicide. Their website is really resourceful for everyone. Those who want to join the cause and help the community as well, you're able to just by becoming an advocate for suicide prevention. It's just quick and simple by signing up on their website, and it's completely free. Also, another thing on their website, anyone can share their story about suicide online, which can reach out to anyone in the United States, which can encourage them to share their own personal story as well. Now, to conclude this presentation, there's a suicide estimated every 11 minutes. In the United States in 2019 just alone, there was over 500,000 deaths due to suicide. With the help of public health, we hope to see these numbers decrease over time. Now, these next two slides are my references for my data and for my image citations.